Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Lillian, and here I share stories, thoughts, and moments from my friends. The day my husband's daughter changed the locks was the day I realized I had no house, no family, and no name on paper. Not even the mailbox bore it anymore. Templeton was gone from the brass slot out front, replaced with a sleek little label that read, M. Henderson, no soliciting. I stood there in the drizzle, holding a beige plastic bin of his things, cufflinks, his travel shaving kit, and one old tie I couldn't throw out, and I felt 40 years disappear from my life in a single blink. "You should have known this was coming," she'd said on the phone 3 days earlier. "He made his wishes clear." But he hadn't. Not really. The man I nursed through hospice, the man I bathed when he couldn't lift his own arms, the man I kissed goodnight every evening, even when his eyes stopped knowing who I was. That man had whispered to me the night before he slipped away, "You'll be okay, Lo. I left you the garden." The garden, the house, the kitchen where I baked his birthday pies even when he couldn't chew. Turns out what he left me was a lie, or a promise stolen before the ink could dry. Before. My name is Lorraine Templeton. I am 68 years old. I make a mean bourbon pecan pie, and I used to think grace was something you served with a smile. I met Peter Templeton when I was 41. I had one marriage behind me, one son who didn't speak to me, and hadn't since he was 19, and a catering business that barely paid the bills. Peter came to one of my luncheons, city officials, fancy wives, a fundraiser for an art museum I couldn't afford to walk through, and asked who'd made the peach biscuits. "Yours truly," I'd said. He'd smiled and said, "Then I'll need your name twice, once for the check and once for the dance floor." We married 2 years later. His daughter Melanie was 19 at the time. Polished, trim, already measuring people in calories and zip codes. She called me Lo like it was a slur. "Never once, Mom." Still, I tried. God knows I tried. I made her lentil stews when she turned vegan at 22. I sewed a button on her interview blazer the night before her first real estate internship. I even wrote a letter of recommendation when she applied for that executive condo complex board position. She never thanked me, but I wasn't doing it for thanks. I was doing it for Peter. And Peter loved me. He did. But in the end, love wasn't enough. The fall. When the cancer came, it came fast. Pancreatic, cruel and sneaky. He was gone in less than 9 months, and in those last weeks I became nurse, cook, accountant, cleaner, therapist. Melanie came by twice, once with flowers and once with a lawyer. "He wants things in order," she said briskly, not looking at him when he wheezed her name. "I've got a friend who specializes in elder affairs. You don't want Lorraine buried in paperwork." Buried? I didn't even know I was dying. Peter told me he'd signed over the house in a trust. He said I'd get a monthly disbursement. Nothing extravagant. Just something to make sure I didn't have to go back to slaving over chafing dishes. I believed him. I sat beside him while he made out a list. Melanie would handle the lawyer. I would stay in the house. I would keep the garden. The rest, he said, didn't matter. But it did. Because Peter died on a Thursday, and by Monday, Melanie's voice on the phone was made of stone. "There's no trust in your name. Dad amended the will last month. Everything falls to me." I remember holding the receiver like it was a burning dish towel. I don't understand. He said there was nothing notarized. He was on pain meds. You know how it is. "I'm sorry, Lo, but you're not legally entitled to anything." Not legally. But what about morally? Spiritually? 40 years of meals, care, loyalty? I was erased in under 90 seconds. Starting from a storage unit. I spent 2 nights in a motel on Route 41. It smelled like mildew and despair. Then I found a senior shelter that offered 3 months of temporary housing if you attended a budgeting class. I signed up, wrote my name on the clipboard with trembling hands. Lorraine Templeton. Still writing it like it meant something. My catering tools, my mixer, my knives, my mother's recipe box, went into a storage unit with a code I taped to the inside of my shoe. Every morning I walked to the library, checked the job boards, printed coupons for soup kitchens. Once a week I visited Peter's grave. His stone didn't mention me, just beloved father. No husband, no second act, no low. Grief isn't quiet. People think grief is slow and soft. It's not. It's loud in your chest. It rattles when you try to swallow. It knocks against your ribs when you're standing in line for canned goods. I was angry, not at Peter, not even at God. At her. At the way Melanie stood in that silk blouse at the funeral and shook hands like a senator's wife. At the way she squeezed my arm and said, "You did your best." My best? I gave up 10 years of my life to care for him. I let go of my business. I sold my own jewelry when insurance didn't cover the home nurse. And she stood at the pulpit and read his favourite poem like she'd held his hand through morphine and bedpans. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because women like me, quiet, grey-haired, polite, don't scream. We remember. The call that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday, 4 months after the funeral. I was folding laundry in the shelter when my prepaid phone rang. The voice on the line was clipped, polite. "Mrs. Templeton, this is Beatrice at Saffron and Sage Catering. I was given your number by a former client. A Mr. Rickman? Said you used to do private luncheons?" My throat went dry. "I did," I said, "but I'm not currently operating." "Well," she said, "we're looking for short-term contract chefs for a private estate dinner. One-time event, 4 courses, high-profile guests. Your name came up as someone with southern flair." I nearly dropped the phone. "Where?" "Bridal Grove," she said. "It's a private gated community just outside Dunridge." My stomach turned. That was her neighbourhood, Melanie's prized kingdom. The investment property she'd moved into before Peter was even gone. "Would you be willing to do a tasting next week?" Beatrice asked. I said yes before I could stop myself. Rehearsal. The tasting was held in a neutral test kitchen. Industrial stainless steel. Harsh lights. No warmth. But I came prepared. Sweet potato tartlets with goat cheese and thyme. Bourbon-glazed pork medallions. Buttermilk biscuits with orange blossom butter. When Beatrice took her first bite, she closed her eyes. "You're exactly what we need," she said. "The client wanted elegant but comforting. Something with heart. Can you be available next Saturday?" "I can." "You'll prep here, then transport to the estate. We'll handle clean-up. You just cook." I nodded, signing the temporary contract with a borrowed pen. As I turned to leave, Beatrice added, "Oh, one last thing. You'll be working out of the home's main kitchen. The client wants it all plated on site." "What's the address?" I asked, already knowing. She handed me a printout. I looked down. 14 Hunters Gate Lane. Melanie's house. The moment I stepped back into that kitchen, my knees went weak. Not from fear, but memory. Same marble countertops I'd once scrubbed with lemon oil every Sunday morning. Same hanging copper pots Peter insisted were too fancy to use, though I'd use them anyway. Same double ovens, same brass pulls on the pantry door. But it didn't smell like home anymore. No lavender dish soap. No faint trace of cinnamon and dust. No jazz humming from the little speaker Peter mounted under the cabinet. Now it smelled like sterile success, air freshener and floor polish, as if someone had tried to erase the life from it. Melanie wasn't there, thank God. Just her assistant, a jittery woman named Kelsey in thick lashes and high heels, unsuited for tile. "This is the kitchen," she said unnecessarily. "We've cleared out the center island for your use. Do you need help unloading?" "No," I said gently. "I've got it." I worked quietly, carefully. From my old canvas catering bag, still smelling faintly of sage, I pulled out my grandmother's paring knife, my worn cutting board, a vintage pie tin wrapped in a towel. I set them out like holy objects. This was more than food. This was reclamation. By noon, the shallots were caramelizing. The duck was marinating. The biscuits were folded into layers so delicate you could hear the butter breathe. I moved through her kitchen like a ghost who had been buried alive. The guests arrived around 6. I stayed in the kitchen as agreed, plating, wiping, watching. But I heard the voices, laughter, champagne corks, that obnoxious little clink Melanie did when she tapped a glass. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice syrupy and smug. "It means so much to me to host you in my home. My father always believed in the power of good food and good company." My father. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "And tonight," she continued, "we have a very special menu, all prepared by a private chef I sourced myself, a real local talent." She didn't say my name, didn't dare say it. She served my duck confit under her own name. My biscuits became inspired by Southern heritage. The peach cobbler, my signature, was labelled as an old family favourite. Whose family? Not hers. Not any more. I didn't say anything that night, just packed up my knives, wiped the counters and left through the garage. But the next morning I called Beatrice. "Do you need any help for upcoming bookings?" I asked. "Prep work, freelance plating, whatever you've got." There was a pause. "You sure? That was an intense night." "I'm sure." She sighed, then said, "Funny. The client actually gave glowing feedback, said the meal was unforgettable." Unforgettable. That word stayed with me. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked 4 more private dinners, all within a 5-mile radius of that house. Turns out, Melanie's little gated community was hungry for Southern cuisine. They didn't want foam or edible flowers. They wanted comfort. They wanted warmth. They wanted the kind of food you remembered long after the plate was gone. They wanted me. They just didn't know it yet. And so I leaned in. I cooked. I smiled. I stayed silent. Until one night, Beatrice pulled me aside. "You ever thought about hosting your own event?" she asked. "A pop-up, maybe? Something branded." I shook my head. "I don't have a kitchen, or money." She leaned in. "I have a venue. You bring the name." That night, I sat in the shelter's community room with a yellow notepad. What would I call it? Not Templeton. That name was gone, buried. Not Lowe's Kitchen. Too sweet, too small. Then I remembered an old magnet from our first home together, back when Peter and I still shared meals at the table, and Melanie still called me Lorraine instead of her. It read, "Hospitality is strength," and beneath it, in fading cursive, "LT." I tore the page from the notepad and wrote in big, shaky letters, "Strength Supper Club, a pop-up table for those who know what it means to serve and survive." Beatrice pulled some strings. An old carriage house behind a flower shop became our venue. 1 night only. We invited 20 guests, no assigned seating, no name tags. Just one long table, a handwritten menu, and me. Apron starched, lipstick on, silver hair pulled back in a low knot. I cooked with my whole soul. Gumbo with shrimp and okra, slow roasted brisket with cracked pepper bark, biscuits, the same ones Melanie stole, only better. At the end of the night, an older woman touched my wrist and said, This reminds me of my mother's Sundays, but with a story in every bite. I smiled. It's been a long story. Within a month, we had 3 more events booked. Within 2, I was able to move into a tiny in-law unit behind Beatrice's cousin's house. Just 1 bedroom and a galley kitchen, but it had a porch swing and morning light. For the first time in a year, I bought my own butter again. I didn't speak of Melanie. Didn't need to, because the women who came to my suppers weren't interested in gossip. They were interested in grit. They had their own betrayals, their own stories, their own invisible scars, and they showed up with open hearts. It was a Friday when the call came. A woman named Gloria, a quiet voice, expensive sounding. My daughter is turning 40, she said. She's a difficult woman, very particular. I want something real for her party, not caviar, not fusion. I want the food to remind her there are things she doesn't know. I blinked. What kind of things? Things that come from love. We agreed on the date. She sent over the address. I stared at it. 14 Hunters Gate Lane. Again. But this time, it wasn't Melanie who booked me. It was her mother-in-law. I arrived early. Kelsey, the assistant, opened the door with a startled expression. Oh, you again. I didn't smile. I'm here for Gloria's booking. Right, she said, stepping aside. The house hadn't changed. Still sterile, still perfect. But this time I didn't flinch when I stepped inside. This time I set up like I belonged. By 4 p.m. the duck was resting. The cobbler was cooling. The sweet tea was steeping. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked out the window. That garden Peter promised me? Melanie had replaced it with concrete pavers and a fire pit. Of course she had. They arrived slowly, mostly women, some men, a few kids with nannies. I stayed in the kitchen per usual, plated, listened. Gloria's voice rose above the others. You know, she said, this menu was crafted by a woman I'd never met before, but when I tasted her biscuits, I cried. Soft laughter. No, really, she went on, because food doesn't lie. It tells you where someone's been, and this food, it's been somewhere. Someone clapped. Melanie's voice was next. Well, it's delicious, but we all know taste is subjective. I personally prefer a cleaner presentation. I took a deep breath. Gloria chuckled. Melanie, darling, sometimes life is messy. Good thing your chef knows how to make it sing. Silence. Then another voice. A man's amused. Wait, didn't you use a chef for that fundraiser last year who made this same cobbler? Melanie hesitated. Yes, she said, but that woman was... I think she moved. I smiled in the kitchen. Still here, sweetheart. After dessert, Gloria entered the kitchen. She looked at me with eyes sharp as razors and warm as tea. You're the reason Peter smiled in those last few years, aren't you? She said softly. I froze. He told me once, she went on, that he wasn't afraid of dying because someone who knew how to tend things would be left behind. Someone who understood roots. I didn't speak. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I don't want anything from you, she said. I just want you to keep feeding people. I opened it later. Inside was a check, enough to buy a food truck, or a brick oven, or a garden. I bought the truck with Gloria's check, but I named it with my own spine. LTS table, hospitality is strength. Painted in soft blue script on the side of an old bread truck I found through a retired mechanic in Dunridge, who took one look at my hands and said, "Those are working hands. I'll give you a deal if you promise to feed me." Done? By May, the truck was up and running. By June, we had lines around the block. Brunch plates, pie slices, boxed suppers. I used handwritten labels, twine around napkins, fresh mint clipped from pots near the window. Nothing fancy, everything warm. And people came. They started soft. Did you hear she used to cook for the Hendersons? Melanie's old stepmother? She's the one who made the duck at that awful birthday party. But it didn't matter, because food has memory. It stays in your mouth longer than gossip does in the air. And my food? It remembered everything. The loneliness, the grief, the long nights in the shelter with powdered soup and a single bulb buzzing overhead. But it also remembered resilience. And that's what I served. The write-up came in July. A food blogger named Dana from Southern Table Stories stopped by and ordered the pimento cheese grits with seared tomatoes. She ate in silence, then walked up to the window and asked, "Who taught you to cook like that?" "My grandmother," I said, "and life." She grinned. "You've got a hell of a mouthfeel on grief." I laughed before I knew I was allowed to. Her article dropped 2 days later. LTS Table serves Southern food with soul, not because it's cute, but because the woman running it has lived enough to feed you everything you never knew you were hungry for. We sold out before noon for the next 3 weeks straight. It was bound to happen. Late August. Heat baking off the pavement. I was restocking pecan pie slices at the window when a familiar voice cut through the crowd. That can't be her. I looked up. Melanie? Standing in sunglasses, linen slacks, holding her phone like a badge of status. Her mouth was slightly open. "You're still—" She gestured vaguely at the truck, as if it were a hallucination. "You're doing this?" "I am," I said calmly. "Would you like a menu?" She blinked. "I thought you were— I mean, after the estate closed, I assumed you went back to Mississippi." I handed her a pie slice. "On the house," I said. "Family recipe." She stared at it like it might explode. Then, under her breath, "This isn't what Dad wanted." I tilted my head. "Are you sure about that?" Because Peter had always loved my pies. And more than that, he loved me. Even if he hadn't protected me like I thought he would, he had known. He'd whispered, "You'll be okay," not because he had secured the deed, but because he knew what I was made of. She took the pie, but she didn't eat it. That fall, a young woman approached the truck after closing. "I know this is weird," she said, "but would you ever cater a small wedding?" She was barely 30, nervous, clutching a vision board. "My mom says I'm being crazy," she confessed, "that no one serves chicken and biscuits at a wedding, but this—" She held up a half-eaten sandwich. "This feels like love." I blinked hard, then nodded. "Yes," I said, "it is." We did it under string lights in a field behind an old barn. 30 guests, quilts for chairs, pie instead of cake. I wore a blue apron and cried during the vows. The bride hugged me afterward and whispered, "This is what a home should taste like." And that was when the idea hit. I didn't want to just serve food anymore. I wanted to make a place. Not a restaurant, not a soup kitchen, something in between. A place where women like me, women who had been erased or discarded or talked over, could come and be seen, be fed, be proud. I talked to Beatrice, talked to Gloria, talked to the woman who'd booked me for the birthday dinner. And doors opened. Small ones, side ones, but enough. In February, I signed a lease on a run-down storefront next to a hair salon. I named it what I always wanted to be called. The Table. Simple, plain, true. We served Thursday dinners. No tips allowed. Donations welcome. The rule was, no one eats alone. Every woman got a card at the door. Tell us what you're reclaiming. Some wrote, my time. Others, my name. One just wrote, my voice. And we pinned them on the wall like stars. One rainy night in March I saw her. Melanie. No sunglasses this time, hair wet, blouse wrinkled. She didn't see me at first. She was looking at the wall, the cards. Then she turned. Her face flickered. I didn't know this was yours, she said. I wiped my hands on my apron. Most people don't until they sit down. She didn't sit. Just looked around, at the food, the women, the stories. You could have fought me, she said suddenly, legally. I could have, I replied. But you didn't. I smiled softly. Number I cooked. I never got an apology. Not really. But 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, one old photo of me and Peter on our porch, back when he still laughed with his whole body. And one handwritten note. He never stopped loving you. I don't know why I tried so hard to pretend otherwise. I suppose I was scared you were the real thing. You were. You are. I folded it slowly, then slid it under the sugar jar at the table. Not framed. Not displayed. Just kept. Like spice. Quiet. Essential. They started calling it the Thursday Light. Not officially. That was still just the table. But that's what folks said when they passed the windows on Thursdays and saw the glow. That must be the Thursday Light. It wasn't anything fancy. Just warm bulbs strung along the ceiling, a few mismatched candle holders, and pots of rosemary tucked near the sills. But it had a way of softening faces, of making tired shoulders drop. Women arrived with creases between their brows and left with pie on their teeth. Every week it grew. A few teachers came, then a nurse, then an old choir director who brought fresh greens from her backyard and said, I don't cook anymore, but I still know how to give. They weren't customers. They were something else, something better. We called them keepers, women who kept going, kept standing, kept remembering that they were still here. Sometimes I'd stay late just to breathe in the quiet after the dishes were done. I'd sit with a warm mug and look at the wall of cards, all those little confessions written in pen. I'm not invisible. I didn't deserve that. She was wrong about me. He didn't break me. I have worth. Every card was a page in someone's silent story, and together they made a kind of song. My song, too, because I was still writing mine, even now, even at 69, even after losing everything I thought was home. Turns out, home isn't the deed to a house. It's a room that remembers your name. One morning in April, I got a call from a local community college. They'd heard about the truck, the pop-ups, the Thursday Light. We're starting a culinary mentorship program for women over 40. Some are changing careers. Some are coming out of hardship or incarceration. Would you consider helping us build the kitchen curriculum? I blinked into the phone. You want me to teach? The woman laughed. Miss Templeton, we want them to learn how to survive, not just saute. And they need someone who knows how to do both. I said yes before I even sat down. Every Tuesday I took the bus to the campus and taught a 2-hour lab, basic knife skills, seasoning philosophy, and, my favourite, how to fix a dish that went wrong without throwing it in the trash. They leaned in for that one, because they knew what it was to be a dish someone almost threw away. By summer, I'd trained 8 women. 3 got kitchen jobs. 2 started side hustles. 1 became my assistant at the table. She called me Miss L. I called her Next. One Thursday afternoon, I noticed Melanie's car parked across the street. Not at the table, but near the curb. She sat there for a while. Didn't get out. Just watched. Then she left. The next week she came again. This time she crossed the street, paused in front of the door. I kept stirring the gumbo, pretended I hadn't seen her. She didn't enter, just looked up at the hand-painted sign in the window that read, "Hospitality is strength." And for a moment, just one flicker, I saw something shift in her face. Not softness exactly, but removal, as if she was finally letting go of the story she'd written about me, the one where I didn't matter, the one where I disappeared. I didn't wave. She didn't nod. But some stories don't end in reunion. They end in release. I still visited Peter's grave once in a while. Not often. Just on cool mornings when the air smelled like earth and lavender. I brought him pie, the good kind, brown sugar crust, a little bourbon in the filling. Set it down beside the stone, whispered whatever needed whispering. Then I left it for the ants and the wind. One morning there was a small bundle of flowers beside the pie. No note. But tied around the stems was a ribbon I recognized. It had once been in Melanie's hair. The day I turned 70, the table was standing room only. We served fried green tomato stacks with garlic aioli. There were candles and cornbread muffins, and a lemon chess pie with my name written in icing. Beatrice was there. Gloria brought her grandchildren. Even Dana, the food writer, came back and asked for a second helping. One woman toasted me, a teacher who'd come every week since February. She stood on a chair with her wine glass and said, "To the woman who fed us with grief and taught us how to season it into something worth sharing." I laughed so hard I cried. After everyone left, I stayed behind to sweep and wipe the counters. The wall of cards was so full it had started curling at the edges. I added one more. Wrote it slow. Wrote it true. She thought I'd be dead by Christmas. I made supper instead. I pinned it at the top. And then I went home to the little in-law unit with the porch swing and mint by the windowsill, and made myself a plate. Duck confit, warm cornbread, a glass of red wine, and silence. The good kind. The kind that means you finally said everything you needed to say. Not with words, but with flour and fire and remembering your own name. Lorraine Templeton. Still cooking. Still here. Still rising.